Right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. We've got a very interesting subject matter to talk about today. As I'm sure you're aware, yesterday Destiny Pharma reported the phase 2b results on XF73, which were by all commentators regarded to be very positive, which is good news for shareholders, and of course it's good news for people who are facing surgical operations and worried about infection in the future. So without much more ado, I shall pass you over to the CEO of Destiny, it's Neil Clark, and he's joined by the CFO, Shaun Claydon. They will tell you a little bit more about the nature of the outcome of the study and what it means for the group going forward. Over to you, Neil.
Thank you, Andy, and good afternoon, everybody. Now, I imagine hopefully you've read the news, read the press release, and the first slide of the presentation obviously is the summary. Destiny Pharma is developing drugs to prevent serious infections. XF73 nasal gel has been one of our lead programs since our IPO back in 2017, and as you saw last November, December, we also acquired another clinical program which is targeting the prevention of a totally different gut infection. But the focus here is on XF73. Please read the disclaimer at your leisure. This presentation sits on our website, and we'll just have a brief introduction to Destiny and the XF73 program, but then we'll get stuck into the study and the efficacy data that we reported yesterday, which is top-line data. We obviously only received it very late last week, and we'll continue the analysis of the secondary endpoints moving forward. But then after that discussion, we can just describe where we're heading next and obviously take questions. So at a glance, as I said, we've got two late-stage assets, and we're an R&D biotech company based in the UK. We're looking to develop clinical packages of data for partnering, and we're delighted to have XF73 with this fantastic phase 2 data we reported yesterday, but also to have the other asset that we acquired last year, NTCDM3, which is the prevention of C. difficile gut infection recurrence. That's completed its phase 2b program, so it's actually more advanced than XF73. But both assets now are on the journey towards phase 3 studies, which we can look to start in 2022. So a great achievement, and these genuinely are late-stage clinical assets in a biotechnology company. They're targeting important markets, as Andy said, the prevention of infections in hospitals such as MRSA, or MRSA as it's known in the States, caused by Staphylococcus aureus. Is an ongoing problem anywhere in the world where hospital operations are carried out. There is this risk of post-surgical infections. And the other asset, M3, actually causes 29,000 deaths in the US alone, 500,000 people suffering from the toxic strain of the C. diff infection. So preventing that is another noble cause with a large market and a clear clinical need. We also have earlier programs, as you can see on our website, and a decent cash position to run the company through to the back end of 2022 after that fundraising that we completed last year. And the pipeline, again, not wanting to repeat too much, but lead asset NTCDM3 completed phase 2, heading for phase 3. XF73 nasal now completed phase 2. We can move that blue arrow along a little bit to the right and heading towards phase 3, and then earlier programs and a great grant support from UK and US entities supporting the earlier programs. But the focus, forgive the grisly picture, with XF73 is on preventing these nasty infections caused by bacteria that reside in the nose in a third of the world, called Staphylococcus aureus. And this bacteria, in a very simple description, during an operation can travel from the nose into the wound, then sort of replicate and proliferate and cause very nasty infections, these sort of post-surgical infections. A third of the world are carriers of Staph aureus in the nose, and if you are a carrier, it's well established, you have approximately a sort of 10 times greater risk of these post-surgical infections. And these infections arise, the market we're looking at, from sort of major surgeries, orthopedics, spinal, cardiac surgeries, and there's tens of billions of these in the US alone, and of course a proportion of these patients are our market who are at risk, and it's well established medical protocol that you should look to check who are carriers in the nose of this bacteria, and if you are a carrier, then you should be decolonized. And decolonization effectively is looking to kill the bacteria in the nose before surgery. So as you enter surgery, the patient is effectively clear of those bacteria in the nose. And this is a significant clinical need, and it also adds up to being a very attractive commercial market. And we can see peak sales, if we're successful in our markets, of $1 billion. So we believe a genuine blockbuster opportunity. In summary of XF73, it's an invention of Destiny Pharma from the XF platform. XF73, its chemical structure was developed by Dr. Bill Love, our CSO. So it's a great achievement for it now to complete that phase 2B successfully, as we announced yesterday. So it's very potent against certain bacteria, especially Staph aureus, which is the one we're looking to target here. But importantly, and you may have heard this phrase or word before, antimicrobial resistance, superbugs. XF73 and the XF platform, because of their very fast action, do not seem to generate resistance and the generation of superbugs. And this is the key attribute, we believe, that's required of new anti-infectives. Yes, you have to be fast, safe, and effective, but also you cannot lead to the generation of new superbugs, which of course develop resistance and make your product, if not useless, then less effective. It's a very targeted approach developed for the nose. And as we're going to see, we've completed the phase 2. It's under an IND. We've had support from the FDA in the past, fast track status, and the product is working under a QIDP, recognizing its novelty and its potential, and there's a strong patent estate. So this next slide is the study design, which is complicated, but of course this is drug development. It's never a straightforward process. But you'll see in the green writing that the primary endpoint, what we're looking to do, is to basically reduce the bacterial load from number, sort of the blue number 2, prior to the actual incision, which is just after number 4. And that period effectively is where we're looking to decolonize the patient in that 24 hours prior to surgery. So sort of the orange stars, 1, 2, 3, 4, they're the 4 doses of the nasal gel that are applied over 24 hours. And what we've managed to show, as you'll see in the data, is that those 4 doses in the patients who receive XF73 before they go into surgery, it effectively kills 99.5% of the bacteria in the nose. So as they are cut open by the surgeon and go through the procedure, they are effectively decolonized, and we believe that greatly reduces their risk of any post-surgical infection. So half the patients in this study were given XF73. Well, 43 patients were given XF73 and 40 given the placebo out of 124 who are actually treated. That intend to treat population of 83 is the ones that are actually analysed, because they went into the surgery with relatively high levels of carriage of Staph aureus. But what we've shown here is a great action of XF73 in decolonizing patients going into open heart surgery, which, as we said earlier, was the key aim of the study. So the primary endpoint was met with great statistical significance, 0.0001. Target for success would have been 0.05. So this really is a better result than we were perhaps expecting, but it's fantastic. Clear reduction, these are log scales, minus 2.5 from XF73 compared to just minus 0.4 for the placebo arm. So some small placebo effect, which you'd expect if you put anything in your nose, be it a gel or your blow your nose, you lose bacteria, but that's not a clinically relevant reduction. So a clear statistically relevant reduction in the bacteria in the nose prior to that period where you're looking to decolonize prior to surgery. So very strong, highly significant clinical data, and the primary endpoint met, which of course is a great success in any clinical study. The next slide just also shows another analysis looking at area under the curve over a longer period, which is looking at the total bacterial load. And again, highly significant results of XF73 compared to placebo. Again, sort of triangulated with the primary endpoint, confirming statistically that there's a clear reduction in the number of bacteria and a clear decolonization. This was the measure actually that was used in the previous clinical study, which we reported back in 2016, which was also very successful. So a secondary endpoint, but what I'm saying here is it supports very much the primary endpoint on the previous slide from another analysis, very statistically significant data supporting the efficacy of XF73 in decolonizing patients prior to surgery. So the overall conclusion, again, as we keep saying, very good data. this 99.5% reduction, a 2.5 log reduction in the bacterial load in the 24 hours immediately before surgery, and also the effects maintained during surgery, which is the continuing risk of when the patient's cut open is when the infections can take place and the risk is the highest. And similarly, the 2.1 long reduction compared to placebo in all populations, both micro ITT and the per protocol population. So again, looking across the data from different angles, strong statistical significance, whichever way we've cut it, especially for that sort of primary endpoint. And we'll continue the analysis of secondary endpoints. As we said on the earlier slide, analysis by area under the curve was also very, very positive. And some of the secondary endpoints, of course, cover safety. In this study, we had to include ENT, ears, nose and throat consultants, just to perform checks during the procedure to ensure there was no harm being done to the patient in terms of nose or throat, which, to be honest, we thought was unnecessary. But in a clinical study, we obviously have to follow what was required by the regulators, and no events reported, very safe, very well tolerated. So really, glad to have another full, high-quality, safe set of data from an XF73 study. It's consistent with all the work we've shown in the previous 6 clinical studies. It's a very potent, but actually a very safe compound delivered in a gel formulation, which again is not an irritant, sits very comfortably in the nose, kills the bacteria, but doesn't do any other damage, and doesn't get absorbed into the bloodstream, so it's not absorbed systemically. So again, it doesn't have any other sort of side effects, which is a great attribute to a targeted treatment to be used prior to surgery to decolonize patients. Also, no impact on smell, which is another thing we looked at in this study for the first time, but both placebo and XF73 had no impact on the sense of smell sort of before or after from patients. So some of the sort of secondary tests that were carried alongside those main primary endpoints also very positive, and again a great set of data supporting XF73 as it heads out of its phase 2 stages towards its phase 3 journey. So a really strong set of data across the board. So next steps, again with the phase 2 data, we will talk to the FDA. There's discussions planned in Q2 looking at phase 3 study design, and this is important both for the actual detail of the study design, but also the patient numbers, which of course leads through to study size, complexity, cost, which is the key thing, and also timelines. So we'll update the market as we get more detail from those discussions over the next few months. Of course, it's a great position to be going into those discussions with highly statistically significant phase 2 data. And we're looking still to target the start of the study second half of 2022. As is normal, as you head towards phase 3s and phase 2s, not only do you have to prepare for clinical studies and do your preparation and post-phase 2 analysis, but you also have to invest and do work on the manufacturing side to scale up your manufacturing as you really enter phase 3s and move towards commercialization. The whole side of the manufacturing process has to continue to mature and develop as well, which is all possible from where we are with our XF manufacturing process, but that will take time. So we'll begin to work on that during this year to enable us, along with the regulatory studies, to start the studies, as we say, so earliest we can probably start is H2 22. We'll carry on discussions with people who we've been talking to regarding partnering in the past year or so. Obviously, those discussions will be accelerated, we hope, with quality phase 2 data, but also we will be able to reach out to new partners who will perhaps only look at opportunities when you have phase 2 data. So as you was seen earlier in the year, we appointed a Chief Business Officer, Dr. Stephanie Buick, who will lead that process. And we can't promise any deals in particular periods, but definitely it's a key part of our strategy. We'll have a really good opportunity to talk to existing and new partners, potential partners, on the back of great phase 2 data, but also clarifying the phase 3 study design being an important part of those discussions. And we'll look to publish the data. And I think it's also fair to say that there's a read across to some of the other XF programs we have earlier in the pipeline. That positive phase 2 data from XF73, which is the lead program from the XF platform, Though there are different opportunities in the earlier pipeline, definitely there's a read across from the efficacy and safety that we've seen in this phase 2 study, which we think indicates that we'll be able to bring more assets out of that pipeline and further add valuable assets to the company, and hopefully that's reflected in our valuation in the next year or so. There's backdrop here, which I won't go to in too much detail in terms of obviously there's independent reports supporting the background and the need for XF73. The left-hand paper from JAMA is perhaps the most interesting, given that our phase 2 has been carried out in open heart surgery patients in America and Europe. This is a recommendation came out in 2019 from US Cardiac Surgeon Society recommending that all patients going in for heart surgery should perform topical intranasal decolonization prior to surgery, the highest level recommendation. They actually say you wouldn't even screen to see if somebody actually carries staph in the nose. You should actually just decolonize everybody because, of course, they're aware of the risk of post-surgical infections. So that is something obviously that we're working towards with this great phase 2 data, but also expanding that with a phase 3 data set. But that implies to me that there is a great market opportunity in cardiac surgeries, but also in broader surgeries, orthopedic, spinal, etc., where, to be honest, the issue is broadly the same. Patients who are carriers in staph of the nose are at risk of a post-surgical infection. And then the backdrop here, just looking at benefits of a product such as XF73. Hopefully it's perhaps stating the obvious that patients who don't have a post-surgical infection, recovery is going to be faster, they're going to be healthier, and they're going to be happier. But also the clear benefits for payers as well in terms of patient throughput. A patient who has an infection, as unfortunately we've all learned through the coronavirus pandemic, patients get stuck in hospitals. It's very, very expensive to look after patients in hospitals. You can get cross infections. So the healthcare and medical cost, actual hard cash, is significant. So reducing infections, you have happier patients who can recover more quickly, and also there's more space and cash freed up in healthcare systems, whether it be public or private. Across the world in hospital protocols, decolonization, nasal decolonization and the removal of Staph aureus in the nose prior to surgeries is best practice. And this is driven not only by money, but also just by the obvious clinical benefits of reducing infections after surgeries and helping patients on their recovery and getting back, hopefully, to normal life. So clear cost benefits. And as we say in our main investor presentation, for us, it's very clear prevention is better than cure. Hence our strategy with our lead assets of having preventative approaches. And just as sort of a last slide, just trying to summarize where we are with XF73 and in the industry, we refer to sort of a target product profile. What are we looking to deliver here to the market? And obviously we constantly engage with experts in the space to check what's going on in the marketplace. But we're very confident that this target product profile that we're heading for is one that will be used and will not only be used by doctors, but will also be a commercial proposition and will get us a financial return. But it's as you say on the left of the list, as you get on the column, it's a safe, easy to apply gel, no side effects. So you'll get good patient compliance, and we've shown that now in 7 clinical studies. It's fast acting, so it's a novel mechanism which kills the relevant Staph aureus strains, and you do achieve this decolonization very quickly. And importantly, we're not seeing resistance, so we can make claims which are backed up by independent academic papers which have been published, but also some clinical analyses we're doing that we do not see resistance. So we are not generating superbugs through using XF73, and that is key, a key issue across the world. The challenge of global superbugs and antimicrobial resistance is important in this space. You must look to address it, we believe, and the XF platform does. It's easy to use. It's a nasal gel. Sometimes perhaps it doesn't sound too sophisticated, but it's doctors and nurses are used to using nasal ointment to try and decolonize patients, and this fits very easily into that protocol. But what we have here, of course, is a revolutionary profile of fast, safe, effective, and not generating resistance and creating superbugs. It's very stable, easy to use. We can manufacture it at scale. And at the bottom one, again, coming back to the point, the XF platform and XF73 address the threat of AMR. And this is become a feature of discussions in our sort of industry with the coronavirus pandemic, that super viruses like COVID-19, those of us in the industry have been working in this space for a few years now. The threat of AMR is similar and has been around for longer and will continue to be a threat for the next decades. So it's very important in developing new drugs in this space that you address the threat of antimicrobial resistance, and XF73 clearly does that, and backed up, of course, by great efficacy data from the recent phase 2. So we're looking forward to having discussions with the regulators and updating on the phase 3 plans later in 2021. And of course, don't forget, we also have our other asset, NTCDM3, and our earlier pipeline. So a really well positioned UK biotech company. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Neil. Now we've already got a number of questions coming in. For those of you not familiar with Zoom, you will see the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And if you can write your questions in there, we shall endeavour to get through them. So I shall fire away. First off, Neil, maybe following on from your last slide, we've got a question. Having mentioned Staph aureus and MRSA in your announcement, what are your views on XF73 or indeed other platforms being active against other pathogens?
Well, Destiny Pharma is a company that's 20 years old, and in the early development of XF73 and other candidates, a variety of microbiological analyses, fungal testing has been looked at. An XF platform is very potent against certain bacteria, and also something called biofilms, where bacteria can sort of hide away in polysaccharide layers, which can lead to very long-term chronic infections. So XF73 obviously is targeting, in this phase 2 program, targeting Staphylococcus aureus in the nose, but it is active against other gram-positives. And you'll see earlier in our pipeline on the website, we have a dermal program which is targeting Staph aureus, but also other gram-positive bacteria. So yes, it's not, doesn't kill everything, but definitely there's other targets we're looking at, as you'll see in the earlier pipeline. But the focus here, quite clearly, as I said, with the XF73 in the phase 2 is Staph aureus. It's not an antiviral, just to add. It is bacterial. It has some antifungal properties, but it can kill those bacteria in biofilms, which is actually a very interesting area of science as well.
Okay, thank you. And Shaun, you've been waiting there patiently. Neil has mentioned the need to invest for phase 3, but also the potential of partnerships. Can you say a little bit about your cash reserves, your run rate that you've got to cover, and whether further financing is likely to be required or not?
Thanks, Andy. I mean, in terms of cash position, we as we recently announced in the interims, we have a very robust cash position. Obviously, the fundraising we did in November has helped sort of increase that available cash. So we do have on the current burn a runway through toward the end of 2022. Now, as you've touched upon clearly, in terms of a phase 3 study, we would need to raise funds for such a study, and that's something we'll be obviously exploring as we move forward in that process. And we've always been open to how that funding might come, be it sort of further equity raise, partnering, and obviously potential grants as well. So it could be a combination of all those sources.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question for Ross. The nature of the phase 3 study, will it be similar in design to the phase 2B? And do you expect an efficacy endpoint to include a non-inferiority analysis versus nasal decolonization with nasal mupirocin?
Yeah, good questions. Obviously, these are questions that we're in discussion with the FDA. We have our sort of own views and own preferences, but we'll have to talk to the regulators. Obviously, the phase 3 will be larger than the phase 2 in terms of patient numbers. It will be similar in many ways, of course. This is the nature of going from phase 2 to phase 3s. Whether we stay in cardiac surgery patients or we have a broader surgery population, this is something we've started discussions. And again, in terms of the comparator of mupirocin, which is not approved in the US, although it's used off-label, but it is improved in Europe. These are things we'll have to discuss with the regulator. Obviously, the phase 2 was a placebo comparator study, and that created certain challenges with ethics in the US, where if you can imagine, you're identifying patients who are at risk because they have nasal carriage, but then you're looking to give them a placebo. Some hospitals obviously weren't so keen on that, even though there is no approved product in the US. But we've learned a lot from the phase 2. There's great opportunities for different types of phase 3 study designs in US and Europe, and we'll sort of refine those, as I said earlier, in discussion. So wouldn't want to comment in too much detail at the moment, but those are all good points and exactly the sort of issues we'll be discussing with the regulators.
Yeah. And again, on phase 3, you've benefited from QIDP and fast track status to avoid delays through phase 2B. How confident are you on a rapid recruitment of a much larger patient group to go through phase 3?
Well, yeah, I was at another company, Ergomed, for 8 years, so I know we're well aware of the challenges of drug development. But definitely, we think we can. We've had some obviously delays due to COVID in 2020. Same with many other people in the industry, but we've battled through that. And we'll go in eyes open into the phase 3, but we will be realistic about our expectations of timelines. But I think hopeful with the quality of the phase 2 data and what we've learned, that we'll be able to, really, we've improved our knowledge of what goes on in hospitals regarding the use of decolonizing agents. So we'll be best placed to do the fastest study possible. But that will, of course, depend largely often on the number of patients. Just how long it takes to recruit patients. So again, it comes back to that discussion with the FDA on the actual study size. So again, I'm afraid we'll update further when we know more on the detail of the size and type of the study later this year.
Thank you. We've got a couple of questions just on competition, such that it is. You mentioned mupirocin. Can you comment a little bit more about the closest competitors who are either established and out there in the market or at the developmental stage? And this related question, are there any competitive products that you're aware of that have shown results that are comparable in terms of killing bacteria and avoiding mutations such as you have already done?
Well, on that last point, in terms of the resistance profile, and it's a microbiological passage study which went out to 55 repeat exposures. We believe that's one of the, if not it's one of the longest ever published studies. So we still believe that the data with XS73 against, in fact, that was MRSA, is class leading. Need to be careful always when you say that, because you're never quite sure of every academic paper that's published in the world, but definitely class leading data that we've delivered there regarding the resistance profile. Regarding competition, obviously there's the old GSK antibiotic mupirocin, which has been approved in Europe, Japan, marketed perhaps as Bactroban. It's not approved for nasal decolonization prior to surgery in the US, although it's used off-label, so that's a benchmark. But without wanting to, it's done a job, but I describe it as a scruffy drug. It does have real problems leading to resistance. You have to give it 5 days before the operation. We think XF73's data is better. And to be honest, mupirocin has been around for a long time, and the analysis techniques and the world of clinical research has moved on. So I think the quality and detail of the data we're generating from XS73, there isn't that quality and depth of detail from mupirocin that was ever reported, as far as not externally anyway. So it's, again, we're at the forefront of with a new drug in this space. There are other competitors. There's some sort of antiseptic wipe approaches. There's a cannabinoid-based approach, but our data, from what we understand, is better. We're the only company, as we're aware, running double-blinded phase 2 studies, cardiac surgery patients, and also 24-hour effect. So 1 day before surgery, 4 doses of XS73D, you'll get 99.5% of the Staph aureus is removed. You're decolonized. that period of risk. So it's good in a way. There's competition, because obviously that means there's a market there. We're not a lone wolf going down the wrong track. There's been enough interest in this area that we know it's attractive. There's been attempts with vaccine approaches from big pharma, trying to develop staph vaccines to prevent post-surgical infections. So why are they doing that? Well, there's obviously a big market here. So we believe that we can. We're ahead of the game, but we're not afraid of the competition. But it's not surprising there is competition in an attractive market which is poorly served.
Okay, thank you. Question on partnership. Although the study news is fairly fresh, I'm sure that you've been thinking about it for a long time. Do you have any preferences on a regional or a global approach for a partner at the phase 3 stage, or are you open-minded at the moment?
I think we're open-minded. The nature of this space perhaps is it lends itself more to regional partnerships, but we have had discussions in the past with some very large companies. So we'll see. It can get complicated if you have too many regional partnerships, trying to coordinate everybody, through clinical development and hopefully through to product launch. So having one partner, of course, can be more efficient, but also, of course, one partner means that you're, if you're one partner, if the personnel change of that partner, or there's a merger or M&A activity, your one partner may suddenly, be focusing on other things. So as with all partnering, there's different approaches. We have certain flexibility at the moment. Also, we have, of course, one partner in the China region, China Medical Systems, which signed at our IPO. So we have one partner in place. So that region is tied up, but we definitely have discussions with some large companies, but also some regional players. And as I said, we'll push forward with that effort in 2021.
Okay, thank you. And again on potential partners, a nice patriotic question: Is the UK leading the way in AMR treatment? And if so, are you comfortable that your apparently leading position is getting sufficiently noticed in the US? It's obviously a huge target market. Or do you feel you're just quietly making progress under the radar?
Obviously we have from the FDA. I mean, first of all, the FDA paid for the last clinical study effectively through NIAID, so they supported the program in that way. We're operating under an IND, which is under the auspices of the FDA. They've awarded us fast track status and awarded QIDP status. So I think we've had great support from the US authorities. And in terms of the world of AMR, it's an international effort. There's a lot of activity in Europe, but there's a lot of activity in the US as well. And I think we're connected with the right people in that respect. But I'm sure we can always we are a relatively small UK company, so we can always work harder at raising our profile, and we'll look to do that. And of course, phase 2 data is a great way of doing that, because you can obviously announce the news, and people's ears they will listen to phase 2 data more perhaps than earlier data, but also opportunities for presentations. Even in this virtual world, at conferences, the specialist conferences, we really will be making an effort this year to shout in a nice way about the success we had and where we're going. And of course, that will link us into the relevant regulatory groups as well as potential partners.
Okay, thank you. Back to you've just been talking about the FDA, back to the process of a phase 3 trial. And of course, the FDA has shown the scope to vary the length and the size of trials. Would you be hopeful of an early launch approval if the data continues to be as strong and encouraging as it has been in the phase 2B?
I couldn't comment really. No, I think from where we are now, it's best to say we need to decide the phase 3 design, and then we complete that phase 3, then we submit in the normal way, as it were. In terms of drug approval route. Obviously, we're hoping that, as I said, coming back to that QIDP award and fast track status, the FDA have been supportive. As we get to share data with them, we're very hopeful that we'll get a positive reception, because they've been supportive of what we're doing, and phase 2 data confirms that we're on track. But until we have those discussions, we obviously we don't have that in certain, so we'll follow up with those discussions. But I think we couldn't make any promises regarding early approvals or fast track approvals. We need to carry out the phase 3 work that will be defined in these discussions.
Yeah, very sensible. And then perhaps a nice last easy question. Could you remind people about your patents and how long is XF73 protected for?
Yep, there's I think there's 85 issued patents. It's triple tier protection. It goes out to the 2030s. So still, still good runway on the XF patents, but also XF73 through the QIDP award. You actually get an extra 5 years market protection. That's one of the components of the QIDP. So in the US and indeed in sort of main markets elsewhere, we've got decent patent coverage, never been under any threat. And we believe that also there's other IP that we're looking to develop around XF73, which will hopefully add to that package. But good IP protection at the moment, and it's something we continue to work on to where we can to look to strengthen that position even further.
Great. Now, there have been 1 or 2 questions about the share price, which I don't think are necessarily ones that can easily be answered in terms of this extremely good news. Obviously, a lot of shareholders have been waiting and looking forward to it for a long time. So the share price is not always going to go up. Well, it has been a very, very good 12 months for Destiny. And in terms of looking forward, there are things that the company cannot say. So I would refer people who are interested in professional analysis to the work done by Dr. Andy Smith in the equity development note that was published yesterday, which goes into the trial details and substantially raises what he believes to be a fair value for the group because of the de-risking as well as potentially the broadening of opportunity that has come out of this study work. So you can find that on the equity development website and probably on the Destiny Pharma website. And in terms of these very helpful slides and indeed past presentations, they are also available on the Destiny Pharma website. So thank you very much to our audience and for a very wide range of interesting questions. Thank you, Neil, and thank you, Shaun. And we continue to wish you very good luck in the future.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.